Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to 9 o'clock here at Washington Heights Church. So glad that you're joining us, whether you're here in person or watching online. And just before we jump into the message, we want to share this week what we share every week, because if it's your first Sunday here, we are so happy about that, and we welcome you, and we know that this can be a large room with a lot of people, but we invite you to take a step in the direction of breaking it down and getting to know us on a first name basis. As soon as the service is over, my wife and I will be right off the platform here, and we call that our meet and greet area. Please stop by and say hi. We would love to spend just a couple minutes with you and get to know a little bit more about you. So today we're continuing our series in a book of the Old Testament called the book of Proverbs. It is all about wisdom, right? Knowledge is knowing things. Wisdom is applying truth to life, to living life like a wise person. And so today we're going to be talking about getting over my selfie. You know, back in the day when we had cameras, we only pointed them in one direction. Now it's kind of a both and we've turned them in our own direction. So today we're going to be talking about the issue that it's so easy for me to see in you, but it's really hard for me to see in me. We're going to be talking about pride. Anybody willing to admit they got a pride issue right up front here? I hope that we're all okay with that by the time that we go from this place. Check this out in Proverbs 11:2. When pride comes, then comes disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. And so often in Proverbs, there's so many verses about this. You'll see pride and humility cast against each other. And it's something that is put out there as an issue for the human race, not just them, but all of us. But again, many times when we look in the mirror, we just can't see it or we don't see it. So maybe to help us go in that direction this morning, can I invite you to take the pride test? Did you study ahead of time before you came today? No, that's okay. Here you go. I'm going to invite you. You got your 10 fingers. I'm going to ask you 10 questions. You just kind of keep them there and, kind of maybe pick your fingers up one at a time here as these might apply to you. Pride test, question number 1. Do you long for attention? And maybe we do this by performing, by being all that and making sure that people notice that. Maybe we do this by being dramatic and people coming in our direction and asking us questions about that. Some do it by being needy. Oh, I'm so needy today. Are you okay? No, but how did you ever know? Well, the billboard that is your face told me that you were not doing well. So, number 1, do you long for attention? Number 2, do you become jealous when other people succeed? Man, I wish that was me. Why do they get all the breaks? Make sure you're keeping score here, okay? Number 3, do you always have to win? Do you always have to win, no matter what you're doing? I think this was highlighted for me when years ago I was playing a game with my kids and felt the strong urge to cheat in order to win. Like, there's nothing on the line there. Do you always have to win? Number 4, do you have a pattern of lying? Oh, and the temperature just got different here in the room. Often what is beneath our lies is a pride that wants us to manage and spin our image or other people's perception of us in a good direction. Number 5, do you have a hard time admitting when you're wrong? Is it hard to confess, maybe only ultimately when you are caught and there's no other way out of it? Number 6, do you have a lot of conflicts with other people? Have you ever gone through life and had this thought that, man, there's conflict everywhere I go? Do you know the common denominator of that is you, wherever you go? How about that? Number 7, do you cut in line? Maybe hypothetically leaving out of here from the parking lot. Maybe I've heard stories about some of you. Be nice to our parking people out there. Number 8, do you get upset when others don't honor your achievements? man, why did they not tell me that I did a great job? Why did they not recognize me for what I did? Number 9, do you tend toward an attitude of entitlement? I deserve that. And rather than being thankful, we have a sense of entitlement. And finally, number 10, do you honestly feel that you are secretly superior to others? I worked for somebody back years ago when I was working in construction, and one day I was kind of standing there and he was looking at everybody who was around. He goes, I can't believe it. I am surrounded by idiots. And he turned around and kind of recognized I was there. I said, thank you very much for that. Do you secretly think, man, there's just not great people around me? If only they were a little bit more like me. Okay, so 10 fingers, how'd you do? So here's how the scoring works. If you got anywhere from 1 to 10, you're prideful, okay? And if you got 0, you're really prideful, okay? Because this is our issue. So how did you do on the pride test? So here's what we want to do this morning. We want to try to understand a couple things. First of all, what is pride? What really is it? I think we kind of have a sense about what it looks like, especially in others, not so much in ourselves. But what really is it? Here's how Proverbs goes on to define it. It is needing to feel better than others, to feel superior to them. Proverbs 11:12, whoever derides their neighbor puts them down, has no sense, but the one who has understanding holds their tongue. C.S. Lewis wrote a lot about pride about 100 years ago. He was this brilliant British theologian who lived a lot of his life as an atheist and then came to know the Jesus of the Bible and began to follow him. And he wrote about it so much because it was so much a part of his own life. And he said, here's what pride is. It's not wanting to have things. It's me wanting to have more things than you. It is me in relation to you and wanting to be in a superior position to you. So we don't even find joy in the things. We find joy in being better, in having more, in having people recognize that we have more. I thought about this even years ago when my kids were still in school. They were in high school, and as you get ready to go to college, the school counselors, guidance counselors will often meet with them. And what do they suggest that kids do? Hey, get in this club and that club and make sure you do this extracurricular, or this would be a really good thing to do in the community. And all those things are fine in and of themselves. But that's not why school guidance counselors give that direction. What is that about? Looking superior on a college application. Now, that might be just part of the deal. But what if we lived our lives that way? That we did things not even for the sake of those things, but we did them for the sake of how it would make me look in comparison to you, and how much more recognition it would garner me rather than you. And so pride is needing to feel better than others. Also, Proverbs tells us that pride is constantly being aware of myself, that my focus is not outward, my focus is inward, my focus is on me. Where there is strife, there is pride, but wisdom is found in those who take advice. And the whole picture there of taking advice is that other people have the ability to speak into our lives and tell us, maybe that there's something that's not all that great, but a prideful person has a really hard time with that. You're always so critical. Why are you always putting me down? But we should be able to hear a lot from those that we know are for us. Arthur Miller was a great playwright and author. And he wrote especially about this whole idea that many times we go through life picturing ourselves like we're on trial, we're in a courtroom, And there's this debate going back and forth about whether or not we are good enough, whether or not our lives matter. And it seems like if that debate goes in the direction that our lives do not matter, we're constantly living with this ongoing tension of trying to prove ourselves and bring enough evidence into the courtroom to say that we matter and that our lives are really good. And have you ever felt that tension of feeling like you're on trial and there are others who are casting some arguments against you, or maybe there are some who are for you? And if we do that, that can really be an indicator that there's a pride issue where we are looking at ourselves and all that makes up our lives and trying to prove something that will bring about a final verdict that says you matter. I think we're really familiar with the pride that looks like swagger, right? Where people come in and it just seems like they're all about themselves and they're not really shy about talking about themselves, and certainly that is pride. But even on the other side of that, of superiority, there can also be an inferiority. And I'll be honest with you, I think I tend over in that direction, where we think, oh, I'm not good enough and I need to do better and I need to try harder. But again, what is the focus of all of that? The focus is on me, myself, and I. And pride is all about having the attention turned inward on my selfie. So what else is pride? Pride is also making myself the center of it all. Not only is my focus on myself, but my self-understanding of who I am as I put myself even in God's position, that at the center of my life is not a God who loves me. The center of my life is me. Check this out. Those who trust in themselves are fools, but those who walk in wisdom are kept safe. And so when it talks about people who are trusting in themselves, there's the Hebrew word that is used a couple of times in Proverbs, and you see it here, where it talks about pride. The word actually can refer to the supreme majesty. That when it comes to pride, what are we striving after? What are we hoping for? What are we seeking to come our way? Is a supreme majesty, that the focus, the glory, the attention would all be on ourselves, and yet we were not made for that. God is to be at the center of it all, but how easily we shift in the direction where we put ourselves in that position. And so when we do that, Proverbs says, you know what position you're taking? You're taking God's position. You're putting yourself where only God can be. So why should we care about this? You know, is it really that bad? I mean, doesn't pride even get you somewhere sometime? Doesn't it accomplish certain things in your life? Well, there are a couple reasons why we should care about this. Here's one. Pride goes before destruction. A haughty spirit, that's also a synonym for pride. A haughty spirit before a fall. I have many examples of this from my own life. Let me just share one of them with you here in the time I have. Years ago, I was part of a board of a mission agency that our church belongs to, and their meetings were in Colorado. So flew out there, and a couple weeks before I flew out, that same group had asked me to write an article about a trip I took over to the Middle East and the experiences there. It was published in that mission agency's publication. And so when I got there to the headquarters of this mission, I was meeting various staff people that were there and just kind of introducing myself. And there was this lady who's a part of a longtime member of that organization. And she goes, "Oh, and what's your name?" I said, "Oh, my name is Roy Gruber." And she looked at me and she goes, "Are you famous?" And I said, "Well, I don't know that I would use the word famous." And I'm thinking she's read that article probably there. I don't know about famous. Maybe person of renown might be a better way for you to put it. And so I'm, walking around like for the next day or two thinking, I got it going on. There's some people here who know me, and wow, that feels kind of good. At the end of the meeting, she came back up to me. She goes, "Oh, that was my mistake. It wasn't you. It's some guy named Ray Garber or something like that. That's who that." Okay, awesome. Pride goes before the fall. And when we think we are all that, there's something not so great coming after that. Pride goes before destruction. Pride causes me to fall. It causes me to fall in ways that can be very, very embarrassing when we think I'm the center of it all and people recognize me as being superior to them. So another example of this not too long ago, and this comes from the Delaware Marathon. This happened just a couple weeks ago. Let's go ahead and roll that video. And 26.2 miles. And there's a guy who's in the lead. This guy is in second. And there's the leader down the way. He's celebrating. Yes, I won a marathon. I did so well for so long. And the other guy breaks the tape. Can you imagine being in the lead for that long and on 2 steps from the finish line? We need to be very careful about the moments that we celebrate, because there can be something on the other side of that. That is kind of embarrassing. That kind of brings us down, and not even in a way that inspires us, to pursue a path of humility, but rather in a way that embarrasses us and shows how empty that pursuit really is. So why should we care? Haughty eyes and a proud heart, the unplowed field of the wicked produce sin. Haughty eyes, a proud heart. And the field can be translated a couple different ways. It can be translated a lamp, so what we see and what it colors, or in the field, what it produces and what it grows. It's telling us that pride colors everything we see and ultimately produces a crop that is so far from what it should be as we walk with a God who has extended grace to us. Not because we're all that, but because it is our only hope to experience the love of God and a relationship with Him. So we should care because it distances us from what it means to belong to God. Pride colors everything that we see. The Lord tears down the house of the pride, but He sets the widow's boundary stones in place. There are so many verses in the Bible in total that talk about this very idea, that when we are proud, you know who it puts us in opposition to? None other than God Himself. If you want to be on a collision course with God, make yourself proud and believe that you are all that, because God opposes the proud. And He says it over and over and over again. In case we miss it, God opposes pride. There's a plaque over in the country of Ireland, and it is where the Titanic was launched. And the Titanic was the unsinkable ship. And they even put the plaque on the wall when it was launched. Even God could not sink this ship. That didn't turn out so well. And there are moments in which we should not fill ourselves with pride, because when we do, it puts us on that collision course with God. Now, did God sink that ship? I don't think that's the case. But when we fill ourselves with pride, we are headed toward a collision with God, who invites us toward humility. All of you, this is in 1 Peter now in the New Testament, all of you clothe yourselves with humility toward one another, because God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. Do you want God's favor? Well, then address this issue of pride. And God's plan A for us is humility. And humility is what sets us up to draw closer to God. Pride will distance us from God and put us on a collision course with Him. Here's a foundation to personal peace. This is actually something that comes from the movie Rudy, if you've ever seen that. Short guy who tried out for the Notre Dame football team, and he has all these barriers that wind up in his way. He goes to talk to a clergy member there. Here's the advice that he got. Here's two things I understand. There is a God, and it's not me. And that's a really good foundational starting point for what it means to empty ourselves of pride and move in the direction of humility. So we're trying to understand what it is, what pride is, why we should care about pride. Let's talk about one more thing. What can I do about it? If pride gives birth to death and humility gives birth to life, how do I move in that direction? How does that become more of a reality? Wisdom's instruction is to fear the Lord, and humility comes before honor. And there's a pastor and author, his name is Tim Keller. He's with Jesus now. He's written some incredible books, and one of those, it's out on our resource shelf out there. It's one of the books that I've been looking at through this series as well. And he makes this incredible observation. Before, we talked about Hebrew words for pride that are supreme majesty. Well, the Hebrew word for humility is supreme glory. That when we pursue humility, what we discover is that there is a glory that is not found in pride, but rather as we humble ourselves, the supreme glory comes when we don't make it about ourselves. There is glory in humility, and there is honor that only the humble find. But how do we move in that direction? Here's what Jesus said one day in Luke chapter 14. For all those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. And do you realize what Jesus is really inviting us to do? He's not saying, get your act together. Make sure that you do really well. It's not about performance at all, not with Jesus. In fact, Jesus says, abandon hope in that. Abandon hope in yourself to achieve what maybe our minds and our hearts tell us will bring us glory. Instead, it's found in a different way, not in being exalting and exalting ourselves, but first humbling ourselves and finding honor on the other side of that, the honor that God gives. So what does that mean? It means that all you need is need, and all you need is nothing. But those are two really hard things for proud people to do. We heard it in Lainey's story, right? She just kind of ran into one roadblock after another in her life, and she even said, I was too prideful. Until one day I walked in to a place called Celebrate Recovery and just said, here I am, and this is who I am. But we may still live with this idea but every day it can feel like I'm back in that courtroom, trying to prove that I'm something, trying to figure out how I can present this evidence so the final verdict will go in my direction. So how do I escape that? How do I move in the direction of humility and get off of that treadmill that takes me back into court day after day after day? Wisdom's instruction is to fear the Lord, and humility comes before honor. And we already looked at that. But the key to it is the first part of it, the fear of the Lord. And we talked about this a couple times through this series already. What does it mean to fear the Lord? It's not this shaking terror and thinking that God is just waiting up there to find us doing something wrong and to come down hard on us. The fear of the Lord is a sense of awe and respect and wonder over his nature, his character, and what he has extended to us, his grace to us. And fearing the Lord comes to the realization increasingly, and this might be something we have to do over and over and over again. It's not like just kind of a flicking a light switch on and all of a sudden it's all, bright and clear. It is coming to realize that God is my only judge. And my judges are not around me every day, and I have to present some sort of evidence to prove that I'm okay. There's one judge, and it's the God of the Bible. And I'm not on trial with the people around me. I have nothing to prove. Not to anybody else, but only to come before God in the way that he has invited me to come. And so one of the statements that Tim Keller, that author and pastor, says quite a bit is a statement that has stuck with me for a long, long time. This is what he said: preach the gospel to yourself every day. Well, what is the gospel? Gospel simply means good news. Well, what is the good news? That a holy and perfect God, before whom we are all imperfect and unholy on our own, has made a way for people like us to belong to him. And it is his doing from beginning to end. And from the very foundation of the earth, he put in place a plan that would ultimately be carried out by the Jesus of the Bible, that he would leave heaven, that he would come and live the life that you and I never could, the life without sin, the life without mistakes, the life without pride. And then to ultimately lay it down on the cross for us, to sacrifice himself in our place. And because of that, we can be forgiven. And then he rose from the dead to conquer sin and death. And think about how that addresses the issue of pride and maybe the inappropriate and unhealthy way of feeling so bad about ourselves. How do I combat feeling overly confident and superior and maybe feeling low and inferior? The gospel gives us a confident direction. Because as we come to the gospel, we realize, look, I can't make it on my own. It's not about me, not about my achievement, not about my performance. And yet in that relationship, I am accepted and loved as I am. And so I don't have to make myself something that I am not. I can come just as I am, as the old song says. But how do we get humble? And I remember years ago, there was a staff member who wrote down one of his yearly goals was to get humble that year. And do you realize how even that can lead us in the direction that I'm going to get humble and I'm going to get more humble than you and I'm going to be the most humble person that has ever lived on the face of the earth. And even that focuses on myself. So how do we not do that? How do we actually move in the direction of humility? We take the focus off ourselves and we focus on Jesus and not ourselves. Let me give you one example of that from the New Testament. This is the Apostle Paul writing these letters. We're going to go through several verses here. He's talking about Jesus who, being in the very nature God, same character, same essence, God the Son, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness. And being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every other name. And do you see the progression of humility and then honor? Being humble and then being exalted rather than exalting self. That at the name of Jesus, every knee should bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. So as we think about focusing on Jesus and who he is and what he has done, I wonder if there's an opportunity, if we can understand what it's like to feel like I'm in that courtroom every day. I'm on trial, and I'm not sure how the verdict's going to go. Turn your attention to Jesus and hear his call to follow him in a way that leads to humility, because there is honor and exaltation on the other side of that, but not in the way that this world often creates. And all you need is need, and all we need to do is come. Would you bow your heads together with me as I pray? And Lord, as we were singing just a few moments ago, Jesus be the name that gets all the glory. And God, truth be told, a lot of times we want the glory. And we want the focus and the attention on us. And we want the accolades and we want the acclaim. But God, may we empty ourselves of all that would lead us in that direction. But God, help us also not to think too poorly of ourselves, because you were willing to leave heaven to offer yourself, because you would rather die for us than live without us. And so God, may we see what you see and understand the value that you have placed on every single human life. And help us to know our hope is in you. So help us to abandon hope in ourselves and to put it in you and discover what it is that our hearts long for and get so twisted and turned in all our own directions. So Jesus be the name that receives all the glory. And so we ask and pray this in that name, the one name above all names, in Jesus' name. Amen.